Hi, I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu. This is the Bonsai Stuff podcast. And this episode of the podcast, which is episode 7 for 2024, we're going to be talking about autumn. It's almost here. It's on our doorstep now, only a few weeks away. And there's going to start being some changes. So I just want to run through a few things of what to expect, what to prepare for, what you've got to keep an eye out for. Also want to talk about Bluetooth connectivity. And this comes from one of my trees, which recently got returned to my yard, where I just feel so much love for it that there's a connection there. And I want to talk a little bit about that, as well as is it getting worse? Like, how do you know when you've got an issue if it's getting worse? So I just got a little bit of a strategy that I want to share with you, which might make the journey or your nervousness about something maybe a little bit more placated and might help you get through whatever it is that's happened with your bonsai. So summer's been tough. It's always tough this time of the year. So it's time to move on to autumn, and we'll start working through that now. So please ensure your tray tables are stowed away, your seats in the upright position, and let's get into it. So autumn's nearly here, but is it? Because we've still got warm weather, still got really, really hot weather all over the place, and there's spikes. But I've noticed that where I'm based in Melbourne, that the overnight temperatures are starting to get a little bit cooler, which is the sort of the first sign for me that we're getting towards the end of the summer period. The second is obviously something which is completely outside of anyone's control, just like all weather patterns, but daylight hours are starting to get shorter, and the trees know it. Your bonsai know it. So there has definitely been a change around my yard where I walk through, and a lot of people I've spoken to as well, and a lot of trees that I've seen come through the yard, through the workshop, have started to get their autumn colours a little bit already. Might be more that it's the sheltered trees, or some that are tucked away a little bit more, some that maybe have been a bit more flogged through the summer period. They've started to show it a little bit earlier, but there's definitely there. It's happening, and it's something that we need to make sure that you're prepared for in regard to your plans and your habits, how you do things. One of the big things is the watering side of things. As the trees go through this initial part of the autumn period, you'll find there'll be a bit of a growth spurt. Normally there's a bit of a push, and I'm talking about mainly the exotics here, because the natives, they don't seem to stop growing. They just seem to keep pushing and pushing. So if you're looking at your exotics, let's just broadly lump them all together and talk about deciduous for now. Then you'll find that you'll get a little bit of a growth spurt. So some of those buds that have been a bit dormant, you've had some flog growth, and the buds are a bit exposed, and they'll start to then push and start to grow. Then the tree will work out that it's not a growing period for itself, and it'll start pulling in resources from the leaves. So you'll find that the growth will stop outwards and it will start coming inwards. So with that change also brings on a really important time for us in regard to feeding. And I talk about feeding a hell of a lot on the podcast, because I think it's one of the most important tasks that we do, but it's also one of the easiest. If you can get the system right, and by the system I mean I use the tea bag fertilising method, which I find is really simple, really easy. It doesn't work for everybody. I get that, but it's one that if you can, then you should use it, because it makes it so easy, with the simple premise that every time you're watering and that water hits those tea bags, you're offering something to the tree. And if the tree wants it, it takes it, and if it doesn't, it just pushes it away. If you want to scale up or scale down your fertilising, add more tea bags, take tea bags away. It's really, 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 really simple. They last about a month there, give or take. I don't know exactly what it is, but give or take, it's about, one tea bag is viable for a normal size bonsai for fertilising for a month. If you want to increase the rate of fertiliser, put 2 or 3 bags onto the tree, whatever can fit on there, and really start to build the strength, because autumn is a time for us to improve the strength of our trees. It's not something you're physically going to see now, but it's that ramping up the tree's strength. So when it comes the other side of the winter dormancy and then starts to grow for spring, that's when you start noticing the changes. if your foliage volume on your tree, if your structure on your tree has improved from spring till now, so wherever you were at last winter to now, if you look at the tree and go, looks a lot fuller. Doesn't matter if that's one branch has turned into sort of 3 or 4, or if 500 branches are turned into 1,000. There should be, by all rights, if everything's gone okay and you've made it through this summer period, unlike me, if you've made it through with everything through that summer period, then you'll find that you're in a position to improve and expand on your structure of your tree. So to support that structure on your tree, you then need to make sure that you're feeding it accordingly to ensure that you are keeping everything alive as you want and as strong as you possibly want. So autumn's that time for us. Autumn's the time that we do a lot without seeing much result just yet, but it comes. I promise you it comes down the track. So that's one big thing. Second is it's a time when you're going to start getting a lot of leaves fall, not just from your trees. You're going to start getting a lot of rubbish blowing in your neighbourhood from around neighbourhood trees. And if you're anything like me, I've got some really big trees around the yard, and I find that at this part of the summer, the local gum trees, the eucalypts, are starting to drop leaves because it's been so hot, and they start to drop their leaves as they start to preserve their moisture, start to drop little branches. So I find that I'm getting a lot of rubbish around the yard. So it's good habit to now start getting into making sure that you're maintaining that area. It's a big issue with pests at the moment. Whatever you do to maintain your pests, be it sprays or alternatives or natural remedies or whatever it is, the trees, as they get to this period of the year and they start to get really, really tired and really exhausted, they need some help. They need a lot of help when it comes to protection from pests. Had a workshop the other day where look at a tree and there's signs. There's caterpillars on there. There's aphid on there. There's some sooty mold coming from the ants coming in to feed off the aphids. It all starts to accumulate now. As the trees start to get tired and tired and the defences start to naturally drop down, they need you as their caretaker to step in and make sure that you're doing whatever needs to be done to keep them at that premium level. And really, keeping things at that premium level is our baseline. We're not wanting to just keep these things alive. We want them in the best position and best condition that they possibly can be, and that comes from making sure that you're doing what they need when they need it. It sounds really easy, but it's so bloody hard. And feeding is one of those things that you've got to be careful when you start it. That I know that autumn, as far as a calendar date, is coming very soon for us in the Southern Hemisphere, and the basic approach is as soon as autumn gets here, based on that calendar, you start the feeding program. Does that mean that I'm necessarily going to start it? No. The one thing that I look for is that weather pattern. I'm wanting to see that spike in temperature has gone. I don't really want to be at, especially this early part of autumn, where I know I'm going to get a bit of a growth period, a bit of foliage growth, where I'm going to have some really delicate, sensitive foliage. I don't want to be encouraging a lot of that big push where potentially that could get cooked and fried and do damage to the tree. So when I look at the timing of the physical timing of saying, hey, yep, autumn's here, there's a few factors I take into account. That one of them definitely is going to be that long-term forecast. So you jump on to whatever website you look at for your forecast, for your weather, and if you can see that things are on the slide down, maybe you've been sitting at mid to high 30s and then suddenly you look into the future a couple of weeks and you see it's starting to get a few 25 days in there and it's coming down and the high then is only peaking around very low 30s. Yep, by all means, start getting into it. If you've got pines in your collection and you've decandled them, then you've got to be very careful. That's not time to be fertilising these things. If the new candles or new buds that have started to grow after the decandling period are still growing, if you go and provide nitrogen to them just because the calendar says, hey, it's autumn, get into it, then I think you're going to undo a lot of the hard work that you've done to this point. We go through, we cut off the candles, remove the fertiliser, tree uses its own strength, starts to grow these new buds. We've shortened the growing period for the black pine, so therefore naturally the needles are going to be shorter. The internodes should be shorter as well. If we go and provide a nitrogen-based fertiliser, then we're going to encourage that growth to extend if it's still in a growing period. So there's a few factors that we look to for pines before we recommence the fertilising. And you've got to be careful if those buds look like they're still in the growing phase, if the needles are still a nice bright green colour as opposed to the sort of olive side of things, if those needles haven't set in the sheath, if they're not spiky, they're still very soft, they're still growing, then applying a lot of fertiliser early in autumn can be detrimental to those trees. So that's something that we'll talk about in a future podcast as well. But just as a general gist, while we're still a couple of weeks away from autumn, just want to flag it that you've got to really start getting ready for this feeding. It is a major thing that we do, and just a few indicators, I suppose, that we need to start preparing for. The other thing is, and I said it so many times, weeds, they drive me insane. It's something that you constantly do, but if you've got bonsai, you've got to learn to accept that. It's not something that you can turn your back on. It's not something you should ignore. The best time to pluck a weed is when it's tiny. That's when it's easiest. If you are on top of the weeding, I say this like I do it, I don't. If you are on top of the weeding of your trees every day, if you're out there and as soon as those little weeds start to grow and they're only a couple of millimetres long and you pluck them out, great, you've avoided the issue. If you wait until they've set and taken hold and they're starting to produce seeds, and these things spread like wildfire because they're designed to grow as fast as they possibly can, then you are never going to keep them out. It's going to be a major job on every single bonsai that you got. So if you can get them when they're small, fantastic. And I leave a set of tweezers around the yard where I'll just pluck them out as I'm walking around. So it's not something where I have to go, I've got to go and weed the trees. It's a job. I need to go to the workshop and I need to get this and I need to go that and I need whatever. It's just like as I'm walking around, I go, there's the tweezers, bang, yep, pluck, pluck, pluck. Leave the tweezers out there, keep walking around the yard. It's not something that I try and make a massive job out of. If I have to bring a tree into the workshop just to weed it, then it's like I need to give myself a smack on the back of the head because it shouldn't be to that point. I shouldn't let it get to there. So anyway, that's what's coming. That's my plan for autumn and what I've got to start doing. The last part that I want to talk about with this autumn phase coming up is autumn's a great time for me to start wiring my trees. I leave the latter part of autumn into winter. So, later when it starts to get really cold, I know the trees are dormant. I use that for my pines and my conifers. That's a perfect time for me to know that they're going to be nice and flexible and pliable and easy to manipulate, and I can get in there, they're finished, they're growing. I can clean up all these extra buds that have grown through this period post decandling or post whatever I've done to the trees, candle cutting or whatever it is, and I can know that I can get in there and clean them up. But the earlier part, the sort of mid part of autumn, I love to use for my deciduous. So when the trees change colour, start to get ready towards dormancy period, they look lovely. I can give them a little bit of a haircut, make them look great, take photos, do whatever I've got to do. Love the colour. Get in there and enjoy that seasonal stuff that I work so hard for. When they haven't been destroyed by summer, that is. Get in there and enjoy that. But then when they start to get on the other side of that, then I start to do leaf removal, start to do a bit of a harder prune back, knowing they've still got a little bit of time before they go to dormancy to heal the cuts that I've made on the trees. But I can also wire the trees at that point and make them look their structure really, really nice and get it to exactly where I want it to be for spring. At the moment, it's too early to be wiring or doing heavy wire on your deciduous trees. They're still a little bit brittle. There's still too much juice flowing through the system. So if you're in there and you're wiring your deciduous now, you need to be very, very careful. If you are too brutal with them, if your technique is not right, if that wire is not on the outside of the bend, then they will snap very, very easily. So just be careful. For me, it's just a little bit too early to be wiring your deciduous. I promise I'll talk about when it is time to do it. So I would, if you're in my climate or you have a climate similar to mine, or if you're listening to this and your climate at this time of autumn or fall in the Northern Hemisphere, it's about the same. Just be careful with wiring. You can always test it and see where it's at, but I'd be saying that if it's still in this growing period, and early autumn is a growing period, then they're going to have juice flowing through them. Got juice flowing through them, they're going to be very brittle and very sensitive. So autumn's on its way. It's nearly here. You're going to start seeing some impacts of it in your yard at the moment. And that's a few things I reckon you should keep your eye out for. Bluetooth connectivity with your bonsai. Now, this is not my idea. I am not going to claim credit for this. And anyone that's ever watched a show called Muster Dogs, and if you haven't, please get on it. It's on the ABC in Australia, if you can get access to it, that is. It is one of the nicest series if you're an animal lover, if you're just a human being. I think it's one of the best series that I've ever seen, and I look forward to it coming out all the time. Whenever it comes out, I love it. It's only really short. It's only normally 4 or 5 or thereabouts episodes per season. But it's about these cattle dogs that people take and they train from pups and they work them into working dogs. And one of the terms that they use in this show is Bluetooth connectivity. I talked about it recently when I was in New Zealand as I was going through preparing for a YouTube video I'm putting together. I actually, inadvertently, I didn't mean to talk about it as a result of that.
We'll be right back.
Is this thing on?
Can everybody hear us? I sure hope so, because we have a lot to talk about.
Welcome to our podcast, Unapologetically Mixed Up. I am Kelly, and this is
Mike.
This is not a one-size-fits-all podcast. We will be discussing multiple different topics, from mental health, marriage,
And don't forget the sports.
animals, and more. There are going to be real, raw, and emotional episodes where we show you our most vulnerable moments. Follow us and our guest on this crazy ride we call life.
And don't forget to follow us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our email address is unapologeticallymixedup@gmail.com.
But I talked about having that connection with your tree, and when it gets hard to make the tough decision because your tree's part of your life. And it's effectively part of you. You've taken it from whatever point it's at, wherever you've got it from, whether you've rescued it, whether you've grown it from seed, whether you've bought it from a nursery, whether you've bought it from someone else, whatever it is. Over time, you build these relationships with your trees. It sounds freaky. If you're not a bonsai lover and you're listening to this part of the podcast, please, we're okay. We're fine. We do love trees, but we're going to be okay. So you build this bond with your tree, and it builds up so much that sometimes you can hesitate or not make decisions, and it's not the right thing to do. You need to make tough choices to improve the tree, to make it stronger, to make it a better, beautiful tree as far as bonsai goes. And you need to make sure that that's a continual thing. So this term, Bluetooth connectivity, where it really came to the fore for me was I had one of my trees get returned, which I talked about previously, my beautiful prickly paperbark Melaleuca. It's one of my favourite trees, and to this second, I still love walking past it. It makes me smile, makes me put my hand on the side of the pot and look up at the structure, and it's like an old friend's come home, and I'm not exaggerating. It really feels like that. And this Bluetooth connectivity came to me when I was looking at this tree, thinking I've got a connection with this tree, and it's not a one-way connection, it's two-way. So the tree lets me know what I need to do, whether I need to fertilize it, whether I need to water it, whether I need to prune it, whether I need to move its position around the yard, whether I need to wire a branch because it's maybe not getting enough sunlight, or thin out the apex because it's getting too thick and dense, or whether I just need to leave it alone. It tells me all these things through this connection that I've got, and I feel like every time I walk past and I give it my Bluetooth connectivity, which is my love for this tree and my admiration for it and the time that I spend with it, I'm sure that it feels that and it gives it back. It's one of these things that until you've got this connection with your trees, and it doesn't happen with all of them. I definitely don't say I'm a tree lover, right? I think we're all tree lovers. I love them all. It doesn't matter whether it's a baby sapling, whether it's, so I get asked all the time, does this tree have potential? 100%. Before I even look at it, it's got potential. But how do you know? You don't look at it. it's how you look at it and how you can envisage the future for this tree and what it can possibly become. It's not what it is right now. It's if you do the right thing by this and it responds the way it should respond and it gives you all these options, well, then it's what you do with those options that makes it have potential. You never look at something as it is now and go, this isn't static art. This isn't a saucer that's been made in a kiln and go, is it a good saucer? Is it a bad saucer? It's nothing like that. Bonsai's forever. Like, it never stops until that thing turns its heels up or you decide to turn your back on it. There's always something with potential in every single tree that you've got. It's just a matter of what the plan's going to be, how long it's going to take, and are you willing, you, not the tree, are you willing to put everything into that tree to get it to that point? If you're not, then move it on. As I've said, there'll be someone out there that will spend the time on it, that will see a vision for that tree, and they'll move it on. So this Bluetooth connectivity, you'll look through a yard and you'll have, 5, 10, 15, 500 trees, whatever it is that you've got, and there'll be certain ones that you'll walk past that you have got this connection with. And I truly hope that everyone listening to this podcast can turn around and go, you know what, he's spot on. There's this one, this whatever it is, that and me, we are connected. And when you walk out in the yard and you've had a long week and you're looking to de-stress or whatever it is, and you're having a refreshing ale or a warm cup of tea, whatever your preference is, that tree is the one that you go to, you look at and go, and it's not just because it looks beautiful. There's something about it. There's that connection that you've got with the tree. That's what makes it special. That's what bonsai is for me. That bonsai is that Bluetooth connectivity where I get that absolute, that buzz, that connection where I invest 110% of what I've got and what I am into something to make it beautiful. And that's not for the world. I love that I show trees. I love that I put them on display. I love it that other people can appreciate what I do and admire and love the trees as well. But I don't do it for anyone else. I do it for me and for this tree. Whenever this tree comes into my workshop, I see that as a really important and special time for me to spend with it and, go, hey, okay, let's get this. Let's do the right thing. And, it's nothing to do with, torture or hurting the tree or anything like that. I think you can pick up from now, it's about putting every piece that I have of me into a tree and the tree giving it back as well. So it's that Bluetooth connectivity that if you haven't got it yet and you're just starting, it'll come. I promise you, it will. You'll connect with something somewhere down the track. You'll get it and you'll go, oh, that's it. If you've got it already, then, embrace it and enjoy it because it is really special times. And it's something that, like I said, it's not the term that I've coined. I haven't made that up. But if you want to see it and you're in Australia, have a look at Muster Dogs. It's one of the best, nicest series. And you don't need to have animals to appreciate what they do with this thing. But that connectivity between the dog handler and the dog, that's us. Our bonsai and us, the bonsai lover, the Bluetooth connectivity, it's a winner. Okay, summer. I've talked about it. You've heard about it. You've been through it. You're going through it. It's tough. It's hard on the trees. Always is. Always will be. No two ways around it. The weather patterns, seem to be getting more intense. And when things happen, things go wrong. They sort of blow out of control. But the long and the short of it is, summer's been here forever. It'll be here forever, hopefully. And at the end of it, when it comes to the end now, things start to show. The trees always start to get a bit exhausted, always need to get a bit more shelter, need to be protected, need to be given a bit more love, a bit more water. They just need a helping hand to get across the line. They're tired. And they show it. When you look at the foliage on these things, they might be, depending on the variety, might be dropping leaves. The tip of the needles might be slightly browned. You could have a little bit of leaf burn on the trees. They could just look a bit tired and a bit dishevelled. All right, so they're getting ready for a rest period. And I've talked earlier about the fertilising that we can do, and that's all cool. What I want to talk about now in this section of the podcast is when something's gone wrong, what a strategy that I use and that I encourage people to use when they come to me and say, hey, does this look right to you? It looks like something's going wrong. And one of the first questions I ask is it getting worse? Is something progressing with this, or has it stopped? Because I'll say, okay, what have you done so far? You've presented something to me. You've shown me photos of leaves and a tree. Looks a bit lackluster. There might be some damage on the leaves. You know, what's eating my tree? It's like, okay, cool. What have you done so far? And it's like, I've sprayed with whatever. Well, I've done such and such. It's like, okay, how long ago was that? Oh, maybe about a week ago. What should I do now? It doesn't look like it. I'm not sure what's happening. It's like, okay, is it getting worse? Like, is something more happening to this tree, or is it stabilised? Have you fixed the problem already? And they're like, I don't know. So what I strongly suggest you do is take photos and timestamp them. One of the easiest ways to do it is put a bit of ribbon or put a bit of bonsai wire, light bonsai wire, just loosely wrapped like a loop around a certain branch on the tree. One of the ones that you know that's affected, take a photo of it and try and take the same photo about a week later, and then take it again a week later, and start to build a bit of a reference guide for yourself so you can look historically and say, okay, it started like this, a month later, it looks like this. Is it getting worse? Or has it stopped? Has it stabilised? Because continually throwing, I'll call them resources, but throwing resources at a problem or an issue on the tree, you may have solved it. You may have fixed it. It might be up for the tree now to say, thanks very much. You've fixed whatever I had a problem with, and now I need to just rest. Just leave me alone. Don't do anything more to me. You've got a tree that's been distressed or attacked or whatever. That's when you stop. You don't do work to trees like that. You know, if you've got foliage that's been damaged and you've got sort of shoots that are a bit long and maybe the tree doesn't look as pretty as what it should, just wait till it's stabilised and then start doing your pruning process. If you get in there and start removing the newer foliage, which is potentially the more viable foliage, then you're going to have a tree which maybe doesn't have the strength in the solar panels that are left to repair itself, to improve itself. So you're sort of being a little bit selfish. You're thinking about yourself more than you're thinking about what the tree needs. You want to look at a nice bonsai. The tree's going, please just leave me alone. Let me recover from this. And then when I've recovered, then I'm back on track. Then we can start doing this work together and I can become a beautiful bonsai for you again. So waiting a period of time, a month, 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is, it's not long. It's a blink of an eye for a tree. So make it that your patience level extends to the point that it's a blink of an eye for you too. Shelter the trees, make them. I've talked about what to do with trees, but this is the reference point that I wanted to talk about in the podcast, was to say that if you can hold off doing work, if you can take photographs of a certain area, get a reference point, it certainly helps for people like me as well. Even if it's over a short period of time, it might be, a fungal issue that's starting to develop on your leaves. So, by all means, as soon as you see it, bang, hey, Scott, what do I do with this? And I'll go, yep, okay, I'll do this. Get on it straight away. But then start taking these photographs. If you're keen, every 3 days. I don't think you'll see much of a change. But if you do it sort of every week and you look at it on a week-to-week basis, and then, after 2 weeks even, have a look at those photos and then come back to someone like me and go, hey, Scott, this is what's happening. It's actually progressing and getting worse. It's like, great, now I've got a reference point. This is exactly what the issue is. Let's get into it. Or you might say, hey, it's stabilised. Do it again for another 2 weeks. Have a look at it over a month period and go, you know what? Seems to have stopped. Seems to have not got any worse than what it is. It won't look like it's getting better over a very short period of time. Definitely not. But if you stabilise that problem, that's step one. That's the most important thing that you can do. And then once you've stabilised, then we can start to look to build the strength of the tree through things like fertilising and, seaweed tonic, like sea salt for us in Australia, and New Zealand, and start to improve the overall strength and health of the tree. But it's a gradual process. When things go wrong, they maybe take a while to appear, or there's a reason why they take a while to appear. The strength of the tree suddenly starts to get worse, or starts to deteriorate. Then these pests and disease or fungal issues or whatever they are start to then creep in a little bit. Then they start to accelerate. We get in, we take action, then they stop, and then they start to disappear, and then the tree starts to improve again and starts to come up based on other things that we do. So I love this photograph thing, but it's got to be of the same area of the tree. That's the key. If you start taking of it overall of the tree, then you're too far back to see the picture. But getting in nice and close, picking one branch or picking one area of the tree and taking the photograph in the same context with the same angle and the same branch over and over and over. Give it a week in between. But if you can do that from the same position, then it certainly helps someone like me to look at it and see if there's a pattern starting to appear, and for yourself, like you'll see whether it's ceased. The other thing with taking the photographs, often underneath is really important as well. That's something that I ask a lot, because if there's certain types of pests or issues with the leaf, then you can see it from underneath a little bit easier. So photograph from the top, photograph from underneath, highlight the branch that you're doing it on, make sure you remember the angle that you're doing it on, and just take the same photograph week on week on week and build up some kind of a reference point where you can see where you're at. Throwing things at problems over and over and over like a shotgun, it's not the approach. It's not going to fix anything. It'll fix it initially, but then you're just wasting your time and wasting your money, and you're doing things with chemicals or whatever it is that you're using that probably you don't need to. It's been resolved already. So, is it getting worse? You need to make sure that you know, but please, continue to reach out to people like me anywhere around the world, because I'm sure there's someone here that can help, and if I can help in any way, as you always know, then I'm here to do it. And just like that, it's time to start wrapping up the podcast. I'm excited. I've got this Bonsai Open event coming up very soon, which I've talked about before, and I'm bloody excited about it. And I've got some more info for you on it. It's only $7 to get into this thing. So if you go to centralcoastbonsai.com.au, it's on the 6th and 7th of April up on northern beaches of New South Wales. It's not very far to get to for most of us, and there's 5 demonstrators running. I've just been given the scheduling for my demos and what I'm doing. I've got black pine structural design I'm working on, swamp cypress I get to first design on, juniper creation, and Australian native. So I've got 4 demos over the weekend. There's 5 different bonsai artists running flat out for the whole weekend. You've got a magnificent exhibition, which I've never seen, and I cannot wait to see it, because there is a major competition attached to this thing. But as someone who just wants to come along to something, you get $7 entry. You get all of that, which is I'm astonished, to be honest, that it's so cheap and so affordable. But anyway, have a look. If you're anywhere near that area, I'd recommend getting there, and come and say hello to me too. Pop your head up and say hello to me, because I'd love to. I love meeting people that listen to the podcast and getting to know your story and who you are and all that sort of stuff too. So that would be great. And for me around the yard, I've got a few more things I need to do very quickly. Is I've got to get another video done for this blue Atlantic cedar that I want to get done. So I've got to do some work on that. Been doing a bit of work on the cedars lately, so now's not a bad time if you're working on cedars to get in there and clean them up a little bit. Nothing major, nothing structural, but just to clean up and make them look pretty. Then that's definitely something you can do. Autumn coming, like I said. I talk about these major events in regard to our bonsai, and I probably rabbit on about them a bit more than what I need to, because I know you guys and gals are on top of it and what you need to do. But autumn is a major one for me that I really try and make sure that I do the best I possibly can, because it pays dividends. And if you're new to bonsai, trust me, please trust me. If you've done it before and you've seen the results and you know exactly what I'm talking about, that health boost, that strength boost that we give our trees during the autumn period really comes back to us and pays massive returns, because we can ensure that we keep taking those steps forward, the vital step forward. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. That 1 to 2 philosophy that I work with, then that's definitely something that you can't achieve without doing a lot of hard work during this coming period. So being prepared for it's no different to being prepared for repotting, or decandling or whatever it is that you work with. But I fertilise all my trees heavily during this period. Natives as well, Australian natives. I love to feed them and up the fertiliser through this period. Even though they do continue to keep growing, the rate does slow down. So I like to really replenish things. It's like putting fuel back in the tank. If you think about it like that, you've the trees used all the fuel that it's had right through spring and summer. It's the tank's almost on empty. Time to fill the tank up by fertilising during that autumn period to make sure that the tree's as strong as it possibly can be, and just keep allowing the tree to do what it wants to do. You'll find that if you don't fertilise in autumn, you won't notice it, and you don't see major things coming when you do fertilise heavily during the autumn period. But next spring and next summer, hopefully you've got a tree which is stronger than what it was for this summer and for last spring. The tree's got to keep moving forward. Anyway. Enough said. You get what I'm saying. Just be careful with watering too. It's a tough one at this time of the year. These cold nights that are starting to creep in, the hot days during the day, you've got to get that balance right. Now the trees are going to start to be transpiring a little less. They're going to start using a little less fluid as well, a little less water. It's just got to get that balance right. So don't be too hard on yourself if you get it wrong, but just try and keep an eye on it as much as you can. Anyway, go there and check it if you've got Bluetooth connectivity too. I'm really interested to get some feedback on that from everybody to see what you think. If it's just me that's sitting alone in the corner rocking and looking at the wall, or whether there's more of you bonsai lovers out there that have that connection with your trees, that bond that you can't break. Anyway, enjoy it. It's a great time of year. The trees look like they need a bit of a cuddle, so get out there, give it to them. Do what you can, as always, and make sure that you give them as much love as you've got in your heart. All right, until next time, happy bonsai.